I want to talk about Neuralink, Elon Musk's technology, which basically plants a computer chip into your brain so that your brain can directly be connected to a computer, directly connected to software. Not only so this software can read signals and messages from your brain, but also so a computer or other software can send messages to it. And in a real sense, this is like it's been described by Elon Musk as the next step. Like we have a computer and it's like almost always in our hands. It's definitely in our pockets. If it's not in our pockets, it's in our hands. We're on it all the time. Our smartphones have become almost like another limb, like the way that our hands and fingers are being shaped over the years of holding it, where you have your pinky underneath it and your thumbs on sides and the other three spread across the back. Like our hands are growing accustomed to holding smartphones because that's like the majority of what we do with our hands now. It's so wild. And so he sees this as the next step in that, which is exciting. It's also, obviously can be a little bit troubling. Here's a video from his first demonstration on how all of this works.
It's microfabricated on a flexible thin film arrays that we call threads. It's fully implantable and wireless, so no wires. And after the surgery, the implant is under the skin and it is invisible. It also has a battery that you can charge wirelessly, and you can use it at home. For implanting our device safely into the brain, we built a surgical robot that we...
All right, so robot is going to come and implant a chip into your head. And good news, it's capable of charging wirelessly. So you're not going to have to plug your head in or whatever. And it kind of goes without saying, at this level of technology, I am basically a caveman. Like I'm a barbarian. I'm an idiot. I don't understand all of this stuff. But I have been paying attention to Neuralink, and the big news is that the FDA just cleared it for its first round of clinical trials on humans. Now, I don't know what humans out there, I know Elon said he's going to do it to himself, which seems really risky, but I don't know who out there is going to be willing to be the first person to get this chip planted in their head. I'm sure there's people who are excited about it and lined up for it, but what are the ethical implications of this, and how is this actually going to move us towards what we were meant to have as a society that's flourishing and thriving? And it's kind of cloaked, and I say that sounds really negative, but I think it's somewhat accurate, with these first goals of helping people who are blind to be able to see by targeting those areas of the brain, or helping people with different physiological conditions or neurological conditions, things like Parkinson's and other diseases and issues that people deal with. They think they're going to be able to reverse course on that and change things, which would be amazing. But with every benefit, there's a cost. And that's something to remember in life. The idea that any benefit you're going to get, it is going to have some cost associated with it. Even in the Christian religion, salvation is absolutely free on Christianity. It is by faith alone, through grace alone. But that benefit, which is the ultimate benefit of eternal life and hope for your future and peace and the Spirit of God dwelling in your life, remember, it had a massive cost. It cost the life of the only perfect human who ever walked the planet. So it doesn't have a cost for you. It has a massive cost for Jesus. So every benefit has a cost. And I think on the cost side of this is the same technology that can send and receive these messages from your brain in order to help with, neurological conditions, biological conditions. That same technology can be used for technology. So the smartphone changed the world. I mean, honestly, the ability that we take this so for granted, but when BlackBerries came out and you could send emails from your phone, you didn't have to be at your house on your computer, plugged into a landline. You could just send emails on the go. I mean, your efficiency of work just skyrocketed. And you would see people with BlackBerries, man, they were cranking out emails on those things all the time. Palm Pilots, all these things. And even the iPhone, when it first came out, of course, what it focuses on is the improvements it's going to make to your everyday life. Instead of having to carry around a camera and a cell phone and an iPod and a calendar and a checkbook, you just carry around one thing now. So it's convenience, and it's making your life better. It's making your life easier. However, we have also seen the statistics ever since the release of the smartphone. When it became mass marketed, there is a direct correlation, and I would bet, if it's not already, we will see causation someday when we have enough data and enough of a trend between everyone carrying a smartphone, and the levels of anxiety and the levels of depression and all kinds of different just confusion and suicidality, all of this loneliness epidemic, all of this coming from the same technology that was meant to be so good and so helpful and has been. I mean, I do so much of my work on my phone, but at the same time, I'm constantly having to fight and monitor myself and set parameters so that I don't get sucked into the vortex of all the other things that it can cause. And it really reminded me of the first real mention of this massive technological innovation in scripture. We find it in Genesis chapter 11. It's commonly known as the Tower of Babel. It says, now the whole world had one language and a common speech. And as people moved eastward, they found a plain and settled there. And they said to each other, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And they used brick instead of stone, and they used tar for mortar. This is a massive technological innovation. Their ability to build quickly, to build things that last, to house themselves, to create places of worship, to create a society, all of that, it just grows exponentially. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Well, a lot of people have been confused over the years of what actually the Tower of Babel is about and why these guys got in trouble. And I grew up hearing that it was because of their pride. You know, we're going to build a tower that goes all the way to heaven, and we're going to be able to climb into heaven, and we'll just, we'll basically be God. And there's a piece of that. But the real issue of the Tower of Babel is that the technological innovation was not being used for the purpose that God had given his people. It was being used actually in direct defiance and direct disobedience of what God had commanded his people to do from the very beginning. So this is Genesis 11. But from the very beginning of the creation of humanity in the biblical narrative, we're given a creation mandate. This is what we were called to do as people. We see this in Genesis 1. It's right after humanity is created in the garden narrative. It says in verse 28, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Fill the earth and subdue it. This was the call not only to adventure, this was the call to actually conquer the earth, to go all over, to multiply, so there's more of you, and then to fill the earth, literally, to fill the globe, and then subdue the globe. Well, what do they say at the Tower of Babel? Now that we have this technological innovation, and now that we can make buildings, and now that it's easy and more convenient and more efficient, now we could just build a high-rise, a city right here on this plane. We like this plane. We're comfortable here. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. In other words, we can build this tower. Otherwise, we'll have to obey God. Otherwise, we will have to actually live out our purpose. So we can now, because of our technological innovation, we can live as our own gods. Not necessarily because we can build a tower into heaven. The heavens typically just refers to the skies when it's used in the Old Testament. They're just saying we can build something that houses us all right here. And who wants to travel and go into the unknown? There's wild animals and there's all kinds of things we could run into when we can just stay put. And this is the cost benefit of these new pieces of technology, because there's a real case that as much as we are plugged into our Instagram and our Snapchat and Facebook and whatever, Twitter, whatever you're on, now it can be plugged into us. As much as we are hooked on pornography as a culture, just at increasing rates, just skyrocketed, hardcore pornography skyrocketed after the invention of the smartphone. Now, instead of us just being hooked onto pornography can potentially be hooked into us. We can literally, because we know this, neurologists know this, we know the chemicals that your brain releases that creates the feeling of a high, an emotional high, your pleasure centers of your brain, we know where those are. So this same technology, once it is perfected, can be plugged into the pleasure center of your brains, and it can just bypass. It can literally neurologically just hack you to try and bring pleasure all of the time. But it's not actual pleasure, and it's not actually earned. And it's hard for me to imagine that not spiraling into absolute chaos. So it's like most things. I mean, if you could be assured that this would be like any other medical procedure that is specifically to address these different ills and diseases and issues, then man, of course, like we should help people if we can. And man, I'm not against this. I am fascinated by it. I'm fascinated to see what comes of it. And I believe God is in control. And every time man has thought that they could be God and fix all of the problems, things have gone really poorly from them. So I'm not too concerned with that. But I do think as we look at Neuralink going into clinical trials with humans, seeing how successful that is, we should be excited about the potential benefits. But a wise person sees those benefits and always weighs them with the potential costs. The costs socially, the cost to our mental health, the cost to our sense of purpose and belonging in the world. And we have seen that the smartphone has done a lot more damage than we thought it would. And I do think there's a chance that given 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, seeing how much benefit there was to how much damage there was will not be as simple of a conversation as we might think that it is.